Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Christy Taylor, founder of WORxK Solutions, LLC. I am a social impact career coach, and we are here today with day 2 of the Mental Health Matters Summit. And today we're talking about mental health advocacy and psychologically safe work environments. Yesterday we had a great discussion on the importance of self-care and advocacy, and I encourage you guys to go back and watch that. It was a phenomenal, powerful panel. And today we are here again on day 2, continuing these great discussions. So I'm going to first go around the room and let each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll head over to Coach Angela J. Go ahead, Willow, introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Doctor. Appreciate it. I'm Willow Merchant, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this panel. I have been a nurse for 27 years and a nurse practitioner and worn lots and lots of hats in healthcare. And I'm now the founder of Emerging Hearts Collective, and we help people make their insides match their outsides. Thanks for having me today.
I love that. Angela, introduce yourself.
I am Coach Angela J. I am too also a nurse. I am the founder of Sound Mind Wellness Center, LLC. So I'm just happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. Rita, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Rita Fiero. I am a social justice consultant and coach, and I equip change makers to have successful social justice initiatives. I've also written a book called Digging Up the Seeds of White Supremacy. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Christy, for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Dominica, introduce yourself.
Oh, hello, everybody. Hello, lovely humans. I'm Brain Coach D, trained by Dr. Daniel Amen, and I work with neuroscience to rewire your brain so you can default to your best behaviors and get rid of patterns and beliefs, as well as work on your brain health because that is part of your life. And I work with companies that I train in mental health and brain health and all sorts of things. It's an honor to be here.
All right. And Mel, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mel Watson, and I am a mentor and workplace wellbeing expert. My background is in both public service and private companies, where I help craft wellbeing strategies that protect workers and employers from things like burnout and workplace wellbeing issues.
Well, Mel, the first question is actually going to go to you to start this discussion off. But before I ask that question, I have to share these statistics. When we talk about creating psychologically safe work environments, here are the results of the American Psychological Association's 2023 Work in America survey. And in that survey, 92% of workers said that it is 57% or somewhat important to them to work for an organization that values their emotional and psychological well-being. Another 92% said that it's important for them to work for an organization that provides support for employee mental health. 95% said that it's important for them to feel respected at work. And 95% of workers said that it's important for them to work for an organization that respects the boundaries between work and non-work time. So we're going to get this discussion started tonight, this morning. And my first question goes out to you, Mel, and you guys feel free to chime in with your perspectives. Why, given these statistics and your experience and background, why is it so important for us to advocate for mental health support in the workplace?
It's important because if we look at what we actually mean by advocacy, right, we're looking at raising awareness of the problems within the workplace, but also raising solutions. And given the statistics you've just spoken around, as well as the fact that the World Health Organization says that over a quarter of all adults in their lifetime will experience some sort of mental health issue, it kind of becomes a no-brainer that as a corporate citizen, you need to look after your staff. So advocacy is the vehicle that drives that, and we need to make room for that in our organizations so that we're actually hearing about what the solutions are.
Dominica, did you want to respond to that?
I do. I think first thing I would look at those statistics a little bit differently. It means that we have the awareness now. People are aware that their brain health and mental health is important, which if you look back at similar studies and go back 10, 15 years, that wasn't even an issue. That wasn't even a conversation. So the fact that we know that we need that is great. And I would say that brain health, because we talk about mental health, brain health per se is crucial because it influences how we make decisions, how we react to coworkers, how engaged we are in a workplace, how well do we manage stress. All of that is related to our brain health. And as you know, I'm a brain health trainer, so mental health is kind of even lower than that. And bringing that awareness, the fact that people know, allows us to open doors to more trainings that people can actually elevate themselves and live a healthier life, work better, provide more income for the company, and have more joy in what they're doing. So I'm very actually excited about the fact that so many people are aware that this is needed. That's a success.
I love what you just said there about just people being aware. Will, I'm going to throw your comments to you for feedback on that, because especially with us working in the healthcare industry, we know that burnout is rampant, right? And it's so important for us to have these a supportive work environment. So I'm going to go to you, Willow, then Angela, and then we'll follow up with Rita, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Absolutely. Such valuable points. I don't think it's a mystery, right? Like, especially in healthcare where I come from, people are asked to do superhuman things every day and then come back and do it again and then come back and do it again. So we all understand why burnout is happening. And I think so much of it is this disconnect, like, we're doing all these things that are out of alignment with our physical and our emotional well-being. And so I think to the point of that we're having this increased awareness and that people are prioritizing physical and emotional health as opposed to this masculine, linear grind culture that we all have come up in. So I just appreciate the points of, like, it really is a workplace responsibility, but it's also just absolutely a moral imperative to support our staff and to support humans, our colleagues, wherever they are within our organizations with mental health, life transitions, rites of passage, whatever it is that they're moving through.
Angela?
Okay, so yes, I think that awareness is definitely what we need, because the employers, they need to realize that they're asking the employees to do an excessive amount of workload. And you have to have a work life and a home life balance. And so it creates, it creates a lot of stress on the employees.
So one of the things that, from a healthcare standpoint, that especially I think it's important to speak to, because Angela had the experience of actually working with patients in COVID. I'm sure you did too, Willow, during COVID here in the United States, right? And when we talk about creating that balance and that stress, there was no balance during that time. Let me get a comment from Rita, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
My specialty is working in the social justice space. And so I often coach change makers and leaders that expect so much of themselves and so much of their workers from a place of saviorism. And so there's a lot of research on how, so my specialty is bringing race into the picture. And I'll do that now. And so it's known, there's lots of research on how Black, Indigenous people of color and other people of color are discriminated in the workplace, how that brings intense levels of stress, how systemic racism outside of the workplace ends up aggravating everything that is happening in the workplace, how shallow types of allyship continue with microaggressions, so how there's personal racism, organizational, and structural, and all of those increase toxic stress. I have a little bit of so I acknowledge that. And I have an unpopular opinion around internalized white supremacy affects all of us, and it does not benefit anyone in the workplace. And I would argue that as white folks are trying to demonstrate that we are superior and demonstrate or prove this superiority that we really believe isn't true. I don't think any of us really believe we're superior. We're just trying to prove it. It creates that rat race. And it creates a rat race that I think is damaging to all of us in different ways. with different levels of intensity, but it creates toxic work environments frequently, more frequently than we'd like to admit.
We just studied the work of Baldwin in a class that I'm taking, and he talks a lot about in the historian in me. I think about like the Lee Atwater tapes, and I don't even want to go down this route because I could talk to you a whole hour about that, Rita. But I think it's survival, right?
Go there.
It's a thing about survival. But we just studied the work of Baldwin, and one of the things that he talks about in his writings on the civil rights movement is he talked about being able to walk in love, right? And I wrote in my paper, in my response to my teacher, I was like, Baldwin had a great perspective on this, but he was and he even pointed out the piece of survivalism in a country where you have been a dominant group for so long and the fight to survive. But I also thought that he was a bit disillusional, is that I wish that the answer to this question on creating these spaces was just let's walk in love. But there's the politics, there's the systemic and systematic issues and challenges. Oh, Rita, I could go on. And I want to throw out the next question and Angela, and then we'll circle back because I think that there's some pieces to what you said, right? When we talk about this discussion on, because we're going to do some discussions in the coming months on DEI and just the basis. We can't, if we just did not address the issue of race in the workplace and the impact on creating these psychologically safe work environments, then this conversation today would be superficial if we did not bring it up, right, in context. And I am a person who, without a doubt, I play it safe, but sometimes discussions, they get uncomfortable because they need to be, right? And that's why we're moving into the DI space. So Angela, so many great things have been said this morning. So when we talk about some of the points that have been made, my question to you is, if you think about the necessary support that's going to be needed for people to be successful and create psychologically safe work environments, how can leaders, and I know a bunch of you work with leaders, so there'll probably be a lot of comments on this one, create a work environment that is psychologically safe and supportive to employee mental health?
So some of the ways that they can do that is by having open communication. You have to have open communication in order to be in a workplace. When you're scared to go to your supervisor or talk about any concerns or anything that's happening within the workplace and also within yourself, because we have our days, we have ups and downs, and we need a supervisor in the workplace that understands those things, that can kind of help you out. Maybe you need somebody to come in and work with you. As a nurse, that's kind of hard to do because you're taking patients. So that's actually kind of hard to do. But there's programs. I know, like for instance, my job, every Tuesday for 30 minutes, we have a wellness coach that comes in and does meditation with us every Tuesday. So things like that can be done. And also crisis management. So when a team player is going through a crisis, we need to have crisis management there for them and not make them feel ostracized because they're going through something or because they're having a hard time with something. It could be whether it's home or work. And I don't think that a lot of employers understand that.
Yeah, you talk about creating these psychologically safe workplaces in open communication. I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback from the rest of the panel. And in my upcoming book called Diversity Works, when I was doing the research behind it, there's a little known term that people know is called decatastrophization. And then that is a process where organizations take an internal look at themselves. Well, from a coaching standpoint, decatastrophization is when I'm working with a client, having that client to take a look at themselves and really take a deep dive into what is the core. So from an organizational culture standpoint, organizations going through the decatastrophization process of taking a deep dive to why is it that my employees don't feel safe? And a lot of times it'll go back to something Rita stated earlier, right? It could be even the racial dynamics. Let me get one of you guys to respond to that, and then again continue this conversation and piggybacking off of each other. Who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in. Oh,
okay, go for it, Rita. Go for it, Rita.
I love what you said, Dr. Christie, because we can't give what we don't have. And so the big contradiction of a lot of our helping professions is that we expect people to nurture others who don't feel nurtured themselves in their work environment. There's a note, like theory in social work called parallel process. Whatever the middle managers are experiencing, the frontline people will experience. Whatever the frontline people are experiencing, that's how they're going to treat people who they're working with. So whether that's clients or in the social justice arena, it may be a different kind of participant. If they're not nurtured, honored in their dignity as human beings, like how can they give to someone else when they are under stress, too much is being asked of them, and so on and so forth. So what you said, Dr. Christie, about practicing internally, that's inside a leader. So within ourselves, within our communities, and then we can give it to others.
I love
if we
that.
don't practice it for ourselves, we don't have anything to give. We can learn along the way and then get a little bit better along the way, but we have to also be honest about that. Hey, we're awful at this, but we're learning it.
I love that. Dominica, let me make sure I'm saying that.
I'm going to offer a little bit different perspective because we keep talking about organizations. Organizations are not just entities that are just there. Those are literally people. And one of the things I always encourage is taking responsibility for yourself first. Don't place it on the organization. Don't say it, my manager or me. What is triggering me and why am I being triggered? And that question should be asked by every person. Now, if every person starts working on their brain health, mental health, reactions, belief systems, biases, we all have them, it becomes more manageable. Because to be honest, we go to school and we learn mathematics and calculus, but nobody learns how to self-regulate. And people who enter workforce have no knowledge. So one of the things I would encourage is starting to explore the ideas of trainings, like you, Coach Angela, said, in meditation, self-regulations, how to react to stimuli, and also taking away a little bit from the idea of that our emotions are reality. Our emotions are perceived reality for us, but the same event might be very different from somebody else. And the understanding that the same situation can be seen very differently from different angles and different perspectives is key to start at the beginning when we hire people. And that takes time because our society is not teaching that. Our society is teaching something totally different and opposite, that your perspective, your feelings are the only valid thing. And that is the breaking point in organizations, in companies where people work, because if everybody comes with that approach, there's no common ground.
I 100% agree with you. In the framework that I'm publishing, it really does focus on individual behavior accountability, as well as though encouraging leaders to look at organisms. I know we've all taken these organizational development classes where you're encouraged to look at organizations as from a biological, scientific standpoint of these are moving cells, right? And so we look at it from an individual perspective of how we might be as individuals and leaders influencing the culture of our organization, how our individual perspectives and experiences. Willow and Angela, we talk about our background in healthcare, and a big part of doing this type of work and having these discussions in healthcare is to get doctors and nurses, any healthcare provider, really to understand the impact of unconscious bias. And I think that when we have these conversations, right, we have to make sure that people understand. I was saying before we jumped on, why is it when I taught classes like this, my scores were so high? Feedback was so high, because we got to understand that just because a person might have an unconscious bias, it doesn't make you racist, right? It's literally an unconscious bias, right? Let me get some comments from Mel and then Willow, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I really love this question. And I would agree with Dominica that we need to focus on giving individuals the tools to work on themselves and giving them tools that have been developed by experts that know about brain health, that know about mental health. The other thing I would say is in an organizational setting, leaders need to understand that there isn't a quick fix framework that's going to work for every single person in every single situation. And that's something I think that gets really missed. When you're developing policy or strategy or anything in this space, you need to leave enough room to help individuals and support individuals, because we know about race, we know about trauma, we know about disability, we know that without any of those things that people struggle with different situations differently. And having a one size if you go through this is the training we will give you, and this is the leave we will give you, is where a lot of organizations fall down, I think. So having that framework that you can be flexible within and providing those tools for individuals.
I really love what you had to say there, Mel, because you're right. We have frameworks to provide some structure, right? But within that, you should have things like your EAP programs, your community of practices, offering those different options that Angela and Dominica said. Because a lot of people, I was doing some research. Rita and I kind of work in that same space of social justice. I say social impact, but I'm pretty sure, Rita, you're familiar with the term passion fatigue, because when you talk about change makers and being overly, you're committed emotionally to the work that you do, you get burnout. I literally run a workshop called the passion fatigue prevention work, because I get it, you get burnt out. But when we talk about this framework, Mel, that you're speaking of, I love the fact that you added the word flexible. And I wanted to say before we move on to Willow's comments that I was doing some research on even the nonprofit sector, and just in the past couple of years, in order to be able to begin the process of making change, the statistics say about 96% of these organizations have started to have discussions about diversity. And like it's very interesting, right? Because we are in that space where we're talking about social justice and nonprofits and all of that. And some of these groups are just now having the discussion and making the steps towards change. And when you start to have those discussions, that's when you start also to say, okay, it can't just be the racial dynamics of putting people on the board. We actually have to consider the actually creating and supporting overall that decategorization process that I'm speaking of how do we create these psychologically safe work environments. And some organizations will consider, I like to use the word foo-foo, like, and they'll consider like, oh, well, we don't want to offer like mindfulness or yoga or, giving people those resources they consider a waste of money. But those options are some of the things that have been known to work. Well, let me get your comment there.
Yeah, I think just quickly, we see the world as we are, not as the world is. So I think this comment about really being able to understand people as individuals, not villainize each other because they have an inherent bias, because they need more time off work, because of all these things. I think that's really the key strategy. I mean, organizations are dynamic, ever growing, ever changing, and building our systems and our structures so that there is space to make accommodations is key.
Well, that's the perfect segue, because the next question is actually going to you, and I'm sure there will be a lot to say about this question. When we talk about, it was really brought up last night about creating those safe spaces, right? And being understanding that, even when we're dealing with people who suffer from mental illness, being accommodating to that, supporting that in a way that is like, okay, if George mentioned, like, if I have an episode, I'm going to need to take some time off to recover. I need that support, right? In order to really come back and be productive. And guys, like 1 in 4 people suffer from some form of mental illness. So, we need to just understand that this is a part of life. And when you look at those classifications and statistics, it's not always like some, extreme diagnosis. You can start out with being stressed. Stress leads to allostatic load and burnout, and that can also lead to depression and other things, right? So there's also there's like, okay, I might be diagnosed with bipolarism or some, mental illness, but then also mental illnesses can come based on things that are happening in our life. So my question to you, Willow, is, and to the rest of the panel, how can we identify and challenge the stigma around mental health in the workplace?
Thank you for the question. I think we start by naming it and telling our stories. And I think as leaders, we tell our stories. I show up really messy to my team, and that allows them to also show up in a way that feels really honest and really sincere. We all strive to be connected and to feel like we belong. It's an innate human need, right? We're tribal by design. We need each other to survive. And I think what happens so often in the workplace is we have these polarized environments where people don't feel like they can really show up and be honest and share what's happening with them. So I think the change is slow. I think cultural change is slow, but I think we lead by example. And I think we show up and we create connection and belonging by really using compassion as our moral compass. Compassion for me equals connection. I can be real judgy, and that's when I'm in a place of fear and not feeling compassionate. And when I'm compassionate, I feel connected and I feel like I belong. So I think it's really removing the layers, that there's so many layers between teams, we're all working in silos. And so I think it's really creating these threads that weave our stories together and that link our programs together and that link us as humans. I think there's a lot of work around going back to recognizing we're all humans. We're all having this human experience. And some of us have a big giant yacht, and some of us have a rowboat, and some of us are hanging on for dear life on a plank of wood as we're sort of moving through this life. And so I think that just really recognizing the value of making work a safe space, so that it's not, I go to a women's circle to have a safe space. I go to a friend to have a safe space. Like, the place where we spend most of our time has to be a safe space if we're going to make any progress in this area. And we're going to really create environments that are productive and that support mental health and support physical well-being.
I love that. And I love the fact, I'm going to challenge you as we do this bounce for the next couple of minutes and getting other people's perspective, but that's a total opposite. As a military person, like, no, you don't show up a mess to your team, right? And so, like, that is the total opposite. I'm gonna bounce this to Angela for about 30-second comments, and then bounce it to the rest of you guys. Organically comment on that, because that's something, right? In my civilian environment, it's like, okay, I can show up that mess, right? But in my military environment, no. Go ahead, Angela, and then we'll go to the next person.
So I think it comes from we have to be honest with ourselves and honest about how we perceive other people and people with mental health. And so even with ourselves, we have to be honest, because I can suffer with anxiety and act like I have it all together, right? And like Christy said, I am in the military as well. And you have to show up. But my old unit, we had a thing that said mission first, but family. But yeah, people always, family always, you always, because if you're not together, you cannot complete the mission. And I think that is something that we should be able to take out into the civilian world. If the person is not together, they cannot complete the mission. The work is it's not going to be great. It's going to be a mess, trash, if we want to say. So we have to be able to, it goes back to just creating awareness, having open communication, allowing people to be vulnerable. You don't have to tell all your business to everybody in your workplace. So I don't want people to think that that's what we're saying, but
I'm not telling you to tell it on TikTok or other social media, along with sharing everything about yourself. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, so it's not sharing everything about yourself. It's that if today I am struggling, my coworker is aware and Angela is struggling today. Let me go over and even offer a hug or offer a little pep talk. We got this. We're going to get through this. Everything's going to be okay tomorrow. But, and it's things like that. And then your leadership, they have to be able to be willing to help you with that. And that goes back to awareness and education. If we're not educated, we're not going to know. And like y'all said before, those unconscious bias, we're going to have those. And we just have to try to get through that and try to recognize that within ourselves. Like, be aware, hey, I'm being judgmental right now. Because we are going to go through things. Life is not without trials and tribulations.
Yeah, I want to get a couple more comments on this, and then we're going to move on to the next question. And I do want to say, if you are one of our military folks listening in, just know that, yes, your leaders are human too. And we might go in the room and cry like I did when I had to write all them EPBs this weekend. But I will say, if there are so many resources available to us for military. So if you're tuning in, and you need the support, I've even used it myself. Military One Source is a great support network for you to be able to get the support that you need. Let me get a couple more comments on this, and then we're going to move on to a direct question to Rita.
I want to jump in and offer a different perspective on this. Yes, there is a component of stigma that is personal, and I think you all have unpacked that extremely well. I think there's another aspect that is systemic. And our health system and our society is not based on the well-being of people. The well-being of people was never placed at the center. The first hospital in North America was in the now Dominican Republic, 1508, and it was designed for the Europeans to take care of themselves and keep the natives out. And so all of our institutions are permeated with this divide, with this, if you're worthy, I'll take care of you, and if you're not worthy, I'll send you to the dogs. That's the basis of a foundation of our society. And Native societies did put well-being at the center. So we can organize a society with well-being at the center. That is possible. But it's not the reality. And so in reality, what we have is people, pioneers like you all and the people we work for, who in the midst of a system, which means legislations, policies, culture that don't support well-being, are willing to stand for well-being. And we can't do that alone. Like, we have to do that as teams of people, because systems are not changed by individuals, systems are changed by movements. And so I think it's really important, especially in stressing mental health, that we're willing to say, hey, like, one of the things I put in my notes for today that I wanted to remember to not forget is, like, don't go at this alone, especially if you're being stigmatized or you have a mental health challenge. Don't go at it alone. Start peeping who else may be struggling like you. Start approaching them at lunch. Like, find 4 or 5 people. I don't even recommend 2. So that if you have to confront a supervisor, you are well equipped to have a structure of belonging, to come back to what Willow was saying, where you can fall back on if that stigma rises up to oppose you. Like, we have to protect ourselves in the work. We can't just smash ourselves against walls of authorities. That's not helpful.
Thank you so much. Let me get some comments from Dominica and Mel.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump in, and I admire people with passion. But one thing that I think for mental health in the workplace is, first of all, understanding if you have a ill heart, nobody is saying, oh my God, there's something wrong with you. You know, you're psychologically. No, it's an ill heart. So if we change the language to brain health and brain issues, automatically takes away the stigma. You're not crazy per se. There's nothing wrong with you. Another thing, I would very much encourage everybody not to use vocabulary like everybody, everyone, and all of us, because that is one of the ways we are creating divide. When people have different beliefs and they're being put in this melting pot of everybody. I have found in my experience working as a brain coach and as an HR manager and HR VP and a few other places, that brain health is crucial. But what's even more crucial is creating the self-responsibility, because in some places I have found that employees come in expecting the employer to be now the educator and the only person and the only environment where they are expecting to be trained. We got to start taking responsibility for ourselves, going, okay, I'm messing up. Yes, I had a bad day, but if I have 7 days in a row that are bad, maybe I should do something about it and I should ask for help. Because it's not the employer's role to go around and go, oh my God, you had 7 bad days. How can I support you? Are you okay? Would you like some training? That is not the role of the employer. And I think bringing back responsibility to the individual with the ability to ask for help. The safe space is very interesting, because safe space means something else for everybody else. Is it that you can express yourself? Is it that there's a person who can go ask for help? What is that safe space we're talking about? Because safe space, again, the primary goal of an employer is not creating safe space. It's a byproduct of mental awareness, brain health, and people who are aware of who they are. So it's much more complex than we're putting it out there. And I would invite everybody to, first of all, kind of, take the mirror, because I messed up a few times in my life, quite big time. And I had to go and go, okay, these are my triggers. So now let's work on them, because if I keep doing this, my employer might not want to provide me with any more services like my paycheck. And that's okay too. So the self-responsibility and assuming that employer is supporting us, and then discussing what is that safe space? What are our expectations in the environment? What is exactly are they supposed to do to make us feel safe, right? And where is the limit, and where's us? Where's them? Where's us?
Thank you so
So-
much. And let me get a comment from you.
Just very quickly, I very much agree with the language around mental health versus brain health, and the concept that, you know, if someone has a broken leg, no one questions it or stigmatizes it. I would say, while individual responsibility is super important, and we need people to be aware and educating themselves and getting treatment for any issues that they have, that there is a responsibility on the employer to make that a possibility for people. And if people are coming into a workplace who aren't aware, as Dominica rightly pointed out, there's a HR process, and HRBPs in particular need to be able to bring up performance issues, and they need to be able to bring up the performance issues and put some responsibility back onto the person, but create that space that that person can then go and find a resolution. So there's responsibility on both sides, I think.
I really love what all of you had to say to this. And Rita, there was something that you said, because the next question actually goes to you. There was something in your story that you said earlier that I was trying to jump in there and say, when you talk about the systematic issues. I remember working, when I first got off of active duty in 2008, I went and worked for an insurance company. And I remember we were sitting in the room, and this was before wellness became really like the whole, but people realized that by doing, preventative care, that you can actually save money. The president of the company that I was working for, he happened to be down at the training that we were doing. And I was like, hey, should we tell folks that if they purchase this insurance rider, because this was an insurance rider for North Carolina, which allowed women to get wellness visits and all of that stuff. He literally looked me in the face and was like, no, because that costs us money for that preventative care. So no, we don't want to, if they don't ask for it, we don't want to sell it to them. We lose money on that. And then like literally within 5 years, right, then especially when we had the Affordable Care Act, and people realized all of a sudden started coming out about preventative care and being able to save money. Yes, it's an investment up front. Then now you have literally like these same insurance companies now giving you incentives to like participate in preventative care. So that's what I wanted to add about, creating that culture, the systemic changes that have to take place. People have to see from a business standpoint. Sometimes it's sad, but the business aspect of it, like, okay, this can impact my bottom line. So I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to close this out. We're going to do Rita and Dominica. And let me get your initial responses. Then we'll do a quick around the room. Guys, keep those answers around 30 seconds so that we can have everybody a chance to respond. And then we'll do our closeout. This conversation has been great. And as Dominica said, we have touched the issue of the surface of a lot of these issues, right? But the discussion is way more in depth than what we can really provide in this hour. So Rita, the next question goes to you. What resources or support systems, because you talk a lot about systematic things and systemic things, can companies put in places to help employees manage their mental health?
I want to speak a bit to what organizational development consultants do, because I think the benefit of coaches is pretty established at this point, since a lot of us have talked about, the internal work that it's important for folks to do at work. There's also the group work, because yes, as we transform, we can transform our teams, or the culture can suppress you. Again, the culture can backlash you to where you were, can have you leave the place of employment once you try to be brave, or can support the transformation you're trying to make. And so we want to be able to build work cultures that are actually supporting transformation towards the society we want to see. And I would say deeply consider working with organizational development consultants, in particular around 3 things. I would say releasing perfectionism, because a lot of that toxic stress is created by people trying to perform, demonstrate, improve, that they're competent. Some people call it imposter syndrome. I call it imposter syndrome. I call it pretext of superiority. The other piece is letting people grieve, like creating space for collective grief. I can't tell you how many nonprofits I've seen where founders left and there was no acknowledgement beside this shallow party that everyone was working with a hole in their heart. There was literally no space. Everything became so hectic that there was no space for them together to process the grief of the founder, who's generally a very charismatic person. If there's a big staff, right, it means the founder was able to build from nothing to maybe, 20, 30, 50 staff. There's going to be tremendous grief in the culture after that. And suppressed grief also creates stress. It's literally trying to work through and be productive through a broken heart. And for folks who have grieved the loss of personal people in their lives, whether it's parents or children, you know how hard it is to be productive when you're grieving. Well, many organizations are going through it, and it's just unacknowledged. And the third thing I'll say is, Coach Angela was talking about building building better communication. I'm going to take it a step further and say building a better culture of collaboration, where you work from the assumption that two brains are better than one. So two brains in the room doesn't mean that the two brains compete. It means that the two brains have to build upon each other to come up with a better solution than the person could alone. And when there are those cultures, there's more creative solutions, there's more innovation, and ultimately there's also more health. Because for people to be more creative, more of us is welcomed, right? Like more of our brains are welcomed, more of our hearts are welcomed, more of our freedom is welcomed. All that actually creates for higher productivity and more healthy organizations.
I love that. Willow, did you want to jump in there? And then we'll again start around the room with everybody commenting, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Rita, you are speaking my language. I live so deeply seated in we have to feel safe to be creative, right? And so I think there's so much of creating our work environments to be a mirror of our home environments, and in bringing in these things that you're talking about around releasing perfectionism and collective grieving and understanding like it's the human experience. And also we can be productive, fantastic leaders and great employees and all of these things. And also we're having this human experience.
Angela?
So what I have found with a lot of companies, and I agree with you, Rita, that those things are super important. And the companies I've worked with or for or alongside with, or I was working as HR, what we created there and what was created in those companies were kind of a cohort made out of employees that were led then by a coach or somebody else, and they spread around the information. They supported each other. It was a support system. Another thing that was created was the ability that there was not only a process of firing, but aftermath process. And that was an emotional coaching process for groups, actually. And people would express how they dealt with the fact that out of the blue, like 55 of their co-workers just disappeared from the workplace. And those things were discussed, and people would share the way they're processing those things. So there are ways that could be mitigating the stress and mitigating the changes. The changes are inevitable. Companies will be firing people. Companies will be hiring people. There'll be stressful projects, and things will be happening. It's just having in the back of your head that can also be introduced as part of the process, part of the firing process, part of layoffs, where then you have a follow-up, where you work with people on processing the information. And there are a lot of things that you can do from the neuroscience perspective, brain health perspective, that will really bring a lot more not only awareness, but tools. Because we all know that we shouldn't be stressed. We all know what we shouldn't be doing. Very often we don't know how to manage that. So those tools and then practicing those tools is super, super important in my personal opinion.
Thank you so much. Angela?
So I believe that there are some, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of industrial psychology, but companies can also introduce those types of psychologists into their workplace. And what it does is it gives the employer or the company a kind of idea of what kind of people they actually have working in their company, the kind of people, because the type of people will differ based on where you work. So if you work in a warehouse versus if you was working at a bank, things like that, working in healthcare, those type of people differ, and they actually have similar outside life experiences, which would coincide with their mental or brain health, as Dominica would say. It would coincide with that. So with that, they can create role models and stories that will help not only the employees, but the employers understand what is happening. So those type of things actually will foster a different type of culture within your workplace. You have to change the workplace culture. If we don't change it, it will just remain the same. We can say it over and over again. You can have meetings within the higher ups can have meetings, but if it doesn't trickle down to the employees and everybody else, the culture will remain the same.
Thank you so much.
I would agree with the idea that if it's not trickling down, what's the point, right? And going to all of the points just raised, particularly around collaboration and building these things into a process, if you're looking to change a system that supports your culture, those are the things you need to do. You need to build it into your process, but you need to pick the best bits. And the way you pick the best bits and what you need, not necessarily what's trendy or loading all of the well-being in where it's possibly overkill, is by consultation and collaboration. And that's consultation with people who are professionals in these areas. So bringing professionals in, but also consultation with cohorts of your staff that have lived experience. And I think those are the two areas that get missed. People think we'll bring all the training in. We'll give everyone resilience training. We'll give everybody this, but it's not built in a strategic way, and it's not built on expert advice and the lived experience of people.
I really love what all of you had to say, and we're getting ready to wrap this up. So I'm going to actually combine two questions, Dominica, for you to answer, because in context, I think that you can help to sum this up. And the first part of this is really based on this conversation today. And again, guys, this conversation just scratches the surface of where we really need to go in terms of organizational cultural development and inclusive leadership development and the whole nine, with understanding the impact of DEI on cultural workplaces. But so in summative, Dominica, can you just kind of really wrap up in terms of what exactly is a psychologically safe workplace? And then I'm also going to add to that, what strategies can be implemented from your perspective, and you've spoken a lot about that, to encourage open communication and mental health within a company, and about mental health within a company. And so she'll give her answer. Then again, guys, we're going to keep the roundabout to about 30 seconds per response, and then we'll get ready to close this conversation out.
I think that's a great question, and there's no one right answer to it. I would simplify it for the needs of this conversation. I would say that a safe place is that it's a place when you speak with respect, you're being spoken with respect back. It is a place where you can come in and state your opinion without having retaliation issues. A safe workspace is when you know you're not going to get physically or emotionally harmed on purpose. I'm going to add that on purpose here because things happen in life. And I would start with just these four, because they can develop into a whole conversation. And what can we do? Well, first of all, is be aware, right? And have the knowledge that all of us come in with baggage. All of us come in with experience, and all of us come in usually with a lack of knowledge how to handle our emotional regulation. So that's the first thing. So the issues that we're having in a company will happen, and they will happen forever, because there's no way we can train the whole 8 billion people in the world to have the competences, but we can get better. And celebrating progress is something I would highly encourage. So anytime you make progress and you see progress in the company, in the culture, in people's behaviors and service that they're seeing, celebrate it and let them know that we're making progress, because that takes away the focus from the outcome that's impossible to get and puts it on focus. And that's a lot of Stanford studies on that. I'm not going to get into it. Another thing is implement the idea that when you're having HR processes and when you're having management, you are talking to humans. So there might be a psychological brain component, and that might be a part of the process that you create. And you can add that in. And again, it's an option. There are so many options. Look at your organization. Look how big it is. I love the idea of people getting together and creating kind of mental health, brain health cohorts for the company. I know that, and I'm going to give a shout out, Accenture does that, and they have huge organizational cohorts that they support their people, and their internal people help each other. So there are plenty of ideas. I love taking the best ideas and trying them out, because the fact that it works in one place, it doesn't mean it's going to work with you. And I'm going to finish with that and pass it on.
All right, let me get a 30-second responses from each of you. And man, this conversation has been so great and so compelling. And so we'll go to Rita, and then we'll go to Willow and Angela, and then Mel.
I would say a healthy work environment, it mirrors whatever it is that you're trying to create in the world. So whatever it is that the world that you want to see happen as a result of your work. And for those who are businesses and are not thinking in terms of social impact, I think it's even more important for you to think about in social impact, because we need businesses to also think about what world they're creating and how they're impacting the rest of our world. And so whatever that world, those results are in the world, whatever that culture is that you want to create outside of you, well, you're the microorganism. So create it internally first. If you're creating a world that works for children, don't ask your workers to take work home and not tend to their own children over the weekend. Don't ask them to take work home after work hours. Like, your internal culture has to be consistent with what you're trying to create out in the world. And I think that also depends from culture to culture and business to business.
Thank you so much. Willow?
I think a psychologically safe workspace is a place where we can show up without our masks, and we can show up and be who we really are. So we're not expending energy putting on a show for our colleagues and our bosses.
Angela?
So I want y'all to think about, no matter what you're going through in your day, when you pull up to Chick-fil-A and they say your name and they are super nice to you, how it changes your whole perspective for that day. So I feel like we need to actually have that workplace culture, so that when I show up to work, no matter what is going on, no matter how my mental health is that day, I am still happy to be there, right? And I think that that comes with fostering and changing the workplace environment and allowing the employers to actually give you feedback as well, and just having open communication and awareness.
Thank you so much. And final comments from Mel.
Yeah, look, I think we've covered exactly what a psychologically safe workplace is with the amount of time we have. I would just say, following on from the point of feeling respected and that you can raise your opinion without fear, also feeling listened to. So there is an art for leaders in not jumping in and trying to fix before you finish listening to somebody. And that goes both ways for employees and leaders, actively listening before you try to fix or demonstrate your respect.
Thank you so much for those comments. Guys, this has been such a great conversation. And so just so you know, we're about to be sharing their information. Each one of our speakers is about to do their final plug. We'll be sharing their information in the chat, but you can also continue to connect with them on the web page that we created for today's event, where you can watch the replay. We're going to start with Rita. I'm going to ask you guys to keep your final plugs at 1 to 1 minute and 30 seconds max. But give us your words of wisdom. Let people know where they can find you and what you have coming up next.
I'm Dr. Rita. You can find my book, Digging Up the Seeds of White Supremacy, anywhere books are sold, and Amazon. I also have an audio and a digital version. My website is Dr. Rita, DRRITA, at ritafieromyname.com. And my words of wisdom are that change and transformation don't happen without guides. Our society has kind of gotten rid of mentors and elders, unfortunately, which is why we are where we are. Look for mentors and elders who can guide you on the path you're on. People who you trust, people who inspire you, people who can lead the way. And sometimes these mentors are outside of the workplace to equip you to be better in the workplace. So, and we always say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So if you claim that there is support that you need to manage your mental health at work and at home, I trust that that person will show up in your life.
Thank you so much. Phenomenal speaker. And I love your passion for the work that you're doing. Willow, let's get some words of wisdom, and where can people find you and connect with you?
My words of wisdom are emerge in love. You are not alone. Find your people. I think if you do nothing else in this life, if we can find our people, we are well served by that. You can find me at willow@emergingheartscollective.com, on Facebook, on Instagram. You can find my book, Letters to a Future Nurse, on Amazon. I help high achieving people reclaim their inner radiance by helping their internal story match who they are out in the world. And we do that through Circle, through coaching, through retreats, and through heart-centered events. So thanks for inviting me today.
Thank you so much. I want to go back over to Rita because I want you to hold up a copy of your book because we shared your information for people to be able to purchase. So Digging Up the Seed. So if you've written a book here, be sure to thank you so much.
It's all colorful in the beginning, in the inside of it, because the topic's hard, but we don't have to be depressed about it. Like, it's uplifting, I promise.
Thank you so much. And Coach Angela J.
So my words of wisdom is just realizing that we are not perfect people and that we need to extend the same grace that we want extended to us. We need to extend that to other people. And when we live by that, you'll be able to understand people moving forward. I am a wellness coach. I have my master's degree in clinical psychology and theology. I am a nurse by trade. And I am the founder of Sound Mind Wellness Center, LLC. Y'all can find me on www.soundmindwellnesscenterllc.org. And I also have my brand new wellness journal. It says, I am ready for a sound mind. And this is not just any regular journal. It's not day one. This is what I'm doing. Day two. This is what I'm doing. It's not that. It's in phases. And a lot of times you stay in phase one for a day, 2 days, a month. You move on when you're ready. And so that's how y'all can connect with me.
I absolutely love that. And she's also my best friend, so I always have to plug that, right? That's your most important job. Okay, besides being all right, so Dominica, I want to hand it to you for your words of wisdom. And if you have a book, please share. We're dropping all of you guys' stuff in the chat.
Absolutely love everything everybody else was saying, and it was so inspiring. And I love hearing different perspectives because that's how we enrich each other. And my words of wisdom I'm going to take from Les Brown is what you tune into, you turn into. So be very careful what you surround yourself with, what you think, what you say, what is your environment, and what employer do you choose? Do the research. Is that employer a good place for you? I'm also a book owner, and I wrote a book, The Magic of Dreaming Big, Acting Small and Achieving Success. And it teaches you how to take focus away from the goal and put it on the process. There is a Stanford study that I've mentioned that shows that when we start creating enjoyment and celebrating on daily basis the little achievements and overcoming obstacles, we become much more successful. Stress and overwhelm disappear almost entirely. And the whole book, you can read it in an hour or you can do it for a month. There are so many exercises and stories in there. And it's for people with stress and overwhelm. You can find me on every social media, Your Brain Coach D, website, Instagram, Facebook. I also run a group for women that are managers, and it's called Leading Ladies Club, where we explore and translate masculine systems into feminine energy. And I work with overwhelm, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, and all is based on Dr. Amen's work, who is my trainer, and Dr. Joseph McClendon III, who's the head trainer of Tony Robbins. And of course, I do that in individuals and for companies. And it will be my pleasure to chat with you on one of our connection calls.
Thank you so much. And Mel.
Yes, I don't have a book yet. But I'm looking forward to reading everyone else's. My words of wisdom are very basic. Don't get overwhelmed by this conversation. Just start somewhere. So whether you are an individual feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you need support, just pick a spot and start. And the same goes for leaders and organizations. You don't have to implement every single thing all at once. find the biggest pain point, find the thing you can start with first, and just start. Would be my words of wisdom, and that's in anything in life, but particularly this space. And where can you find me? You can find me at melwatson.com. I am a neurodivergent founder. I work with organizations large and small on their diversity and inclusion strategies, their wellbeing at work strategies, and I support individuals, particularly high achieving women, with overwhelm, burnout, and putting systems in place. I'm a big systems person, in a shock to no one, because I'm neurodivergent. So helping women put systems in place in their own life to move past overwhelm and support them in a lot of these things. So that's what I do.
Mel, I think that you were the perfect person to end this, because when we talk about the impact, this 1 hour conversation, as Adrian is dropping in the chat, was to just pick a spot, right? We just picked a spot. That's what we're doing today. And we started a conversation. It has been a pleasure to host each of you. And just my little personal plug, my name is Dr. Christy Taylor. I am a social impact career coach. We do work in the social impact sector. We support mission-driven individuals and organizations in social impact. We also organize social impact events such as this. We encourage you to go on our website and to check out the replay from yesterday. What do we have coming up? We'll be speaking at Walmart in the next couple of weeks. We also are running our May prayer campaign. So when we're talking about our book, my goal is to, if you are a faith-based individual, you can purchase my book, Prayer Works. And if you see the WORxK, you might not can see it there, but the book Prayer Works, because we believe that we are the prescription for change for mission-driven individuals and organizations in the social impact space. And again, thank you guys so much for coming on. We encourage you to check out some of the workshops that we have coming up for our career-based, as well as our Passion Fatigue workshop for Black women that's going to be happening in June. And encourage you to also check out the replay and to check out all of our special guest speakers today. It has really been a pleasure. This conversation was a jumping point. It was a start for definitely a deep dive in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day.